Y is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
Is it
CNN read this story.
okay?
Um, so, and this is from this is from BuzzFeed, so this is a legit story. They did a survey to see how many people in the country feel about this new ballroom being built.
Yes.
Did you see this?
No.
So, not a political show,
Mm-mm.
but Americans who support slash or believe in a new White House ballroom, that's at 28%.
Okay.
So, still some work to be done to win over some naysayers.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
I feel like part of the problem is that they've got those grand steps and not a door to get into the place there. But again, not an architect, not an architectural show.
Also problematic, but
Yeah.
also, again, hasn't there always been a ballroom? Like I've seen lots of people dance. I've seen that picture of Princess Di and John Travolta for
Wasn't
many
that in the
years.
East Room?
I don't know,
I
but
don't
it
know. I've never been
serves as a
invited.
ballroom.
Right. But 28% feel like, yeah, the White House needs a new ballroom. 29 people, I'm sorry, 29% of people believe in telepathy.
Mm-hmm.
So 1% higher believe in telepathy than believe that we need a new ballroom. And then here's the big one: 39%, 11% more
Mm-hmm.
believe in ghosts.
Yeah.
So ghosts rank better than the ballroom.
Which one should be concerned about that because since we more of us do believe in ghosts, you better believe if you're that mess they're doing over there is gonna wake up the dead. Like
I
you
was
are
going to
gonna have
say, yeah.
Ted
And
Lincoln
didn't,
coming after you and Jackie Kennedy and a host of people.
well, if I'm not mistaken, I believe, isn't the East Room haunted by the ghost of Dolly Madison? The story
Dolly
goes.
Madison, I do believe, is a big haunter there because I remember as a kid,
Yeah.
Dolly Madison cakes and such.
Now, was she, I'm trying to remember now again, was she the one, she saved the Washington portrait during the sacking of Washington by the British.
Correct.
But I feel like her ghost is walking around doing laundry, which seems like such a gender coded
Yeah.
ghost
Well,
activity.
it's a different era.
I know, but
But also, wouldn't she have had people to do that? Unfortunately, people maybe have
yeah, like she's first lady of the nation. She's not,
doing laundry,
I wouldn't think so.
especially in that era.
Right. Like,
Are you sure she wasn't making snack cakes to rival Little Debbie?
oh my God, that'd be better. But like, I feel like, and I understand she didn't live in the house, but it's not like people always talk about Martha Washington beating her clothes on the rocks in the
Right,
Potomac.
right. No, she definitely wasn't doing that.
And look at Martha. She was not, she was going to tell somebody to do that.
Oh, yeah, for
Of
sure.
course, she probably owned that person she was telling to do that.
Correct.
Okay,
It's
so it's not a great analogy here.
not great.
Okay, let's skip ahead.
You need to like go off of the laundry.
Yeah, as a nation, never mind ballrooms, I feel like we can all agree that ghosts should not have to do laundry.
No, unless you really enjoy doing laundry. I mean, do you believe this whole thing that like the outfit you die in is the outfit you're stuck in as a ghost forever?
This is why I dress the same every single day.
I know, but well, this is why I try to. I mean, you don't always see me at my best because it's depending when we record, but the
Yeah,
majority,
let me know when I do.
I know the majority of my outfits, I do put diamond care into. It just might not be when we're podcasting.
It's definitely not my pocket. But no, that's one of the many
I make
reasons.
time for us.
So, like that way you get up in the morning, you don't really have to think about what, not like the male wardrobe is some elaborate,
It
today I'm
can
wearing
be.
tails. It can be, but most people it's not.
It'd be nice if it was.
It would be great. I wish I had the, listen, if I had the budget that would allow some driving mocks
Right.
and
Cravat and a
for,
blazer.
oh my God, yes, and like an around the house robe, sort of like a Sherlock Holmes thing to just,
Yes.
I guess in that scenario, also pipe smoking would be okay and kind of socially accepted again.
Of course. I feel like
Totally.
pipe smoking should be socially accepted again. Nothing smells better than a good pipe. It's not great for you, but it smells so good.
For me, it's in small doses. like you walk into a room and you're just like, Grandpa? And then like after 10 minutes, it's like, okay, we can
Well,
put
yeah,
the
you don't
filter
want
on.
them
Let's get
sitting
this out of here.
it forever, but nobody smokes a pipe anymore.
No. I remember one time, like 10 years ago, I was at an airport, like waiting for the pickup shuttle to go to where you parked your cars. And there was a woman smoking a cigarette with a cigarette holder. And I was just like, oh my
Yes.
God, Miss Scarlett, where have you been?
This is what I would do if I smoked. I would have a cigarette holder. I would smoke Lucky Strikes
Through the cigarette holder.
with a cigarette holder.
I feel like if you have a cigarette holder, you gotta have your own custom rolled
Well,
brand
there's that. I don't know. I think you do what you can do. I mean,
with
I
the
just,
two gold bands around the, yeah.
Mhm. And I would, although the reason I would use Lucky Strikes is because I still like the packagings. It's so old timey, but I would
Sure.
put them in my cigarette like case, which was
Mm,
old. But I do have a cigarette case that's actually been repurposed to a business card holder, which is my favorite.
so you could take the cigarette out and then like tap it on the case,
Yes.
right?
But you know what? I've never been a smoker ever. I've
Likewise.
maybe had a couple drunken cigarettes at the bar in my early 20s, like, but not even like, oh, when I drink, I smoke. Like I've
Right.
cigarettes and also with an au pair when I was like 10 in England in the woods. But um not my au pair, my friend's au pair. She
Oh,
gave
oh, that makes it okay then.
both of us. So we but there
The
is
80s were a crazy time. We just need
they
to
really
like,
were. But
yeah.
I really wanted to look cool in those one or two times I smoked a cigarette.
Hmm.
I didn't. I did not look
I
cool.
feel like I would just
I wanted
immediately
to look
just
like
start.
Neil Wallace, and I didn't.
I just
Or
feel like I'd immediately start just coughing
right,
profusely to the point where it's like, are you gonna vomit?
right. Yeah, it was not a worthwhile venture for me. I
And
didn't look
nothing's
I
cooler than like,
looked like Carol Lombard. I looked like a dork trying to, like a
right,
kid
trying to
trying.
look like Harold Lombard.
Correct.
Right. Well, you know what they say, a hooker to cut to look like Lana Turner is still a hooker.
Mhm.
Unless, of course, you are Lana Turner.
Right.
But yeah, but like cigarette holders have just gone. No one uses them anymore. And like seeing this woman, I was like, okay, there's Hunter Thompson and you, and that's it.
Right.
And Miss Scarlet. Sorry,
And Miss
three,
Scarlet.
three people. Hunter Thompson, this woman, and Miss Scarlet, and that's it.
And I mean, Holly Golightly rocked a great cigarette holder.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Hmm.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
It was a pleasant surprise to log on to Peacock and see It's Dorothy, and then to see your name next to it. How did this come about? How did you get to make this film?
Well, I think I started, it's been close to 4 years now it took me to make It's Dorothy. Some time had passed after my first feature doc, You Don't Know Me, and I knew I wanted to do something again, but wasn't sure exactly what space it was. But after some time had passed. I mean, we were all kind of like living through the pandemic at that time. And, um, the question of what did I want to look at? What space did I want to play with? I kind of came to the conclusion very quickly I wanted to play somewhere in Oz. And I didn't know exactly what that would look like in the and so because I had grown up and loved watching the MGM film with Judy Garland. I loved Return to Oz as a child. I loved The Wiz. And so I knew it was something Oz related, but what would be the through line? And so, um, after looking at all the titles and looking at everybody involved, it didn't take long to realize that Dorothy was the through line. Dorothy was the through line and allowed for so many different interesting conversations about the women who played her, and larger conversations about, ourselves, our gender, our bodies, our skin, our sexuality, and so many things I found fascinating about the women who played. And so my curiosity led me to want to speak to as many different women who played Dorothy and try to gather their better understanding of their experience stepping into the role, the pressures, that came with it, what the actual filming was like, the response afterwards. And so it was just the beginning was driven by my curiosity and love for the character.
And it's interesting as a film because I feel like at first, early on watching it, I was like, okay, it's a movie about the Dorothys of the world.
Mhm.
But then very quickly it starts going down some other roads I wasn't expecting, and some of the details you go into are things that, yeah, you would not expect in a film that's just like, hey, this is about a kids movie from 75
Yeah.
years ago or something. How much of what you knew about the project and this character did you bring to this, and how much of it was just a, huh, didn't know that?
hmm I mean, I knew, a lot of the basics. I knew a lot of the lore around the MGM film that is out there, and so I didn't want to tread over any of that. So I steered clear of you know, hanging munchkins and makeup on set that asbestos snow. I steered clear of all that because I that had been done and that was something different. What I hadn't actually I mean, also the idea of talking about a fictional character excited me. I entered this project um, with just looking at the format of a biopic, of a biography of a fictional character, and I was very excited about that potential. Like, what would that look like? I had there's nothing else I can point to that does this. And I also don't think that there is another character that you could do something like this for, like maybe James Bond or Spider-Man or something like that, are characters that we see throughout culture. But the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, written by L. Frank Baum in 1900, has developed and adapted into so many different beautiful things throughout the last, 100 plus years, 125 years. So, um, the things that I didn't know going into it was mostly I wanted to speak to the experiences to the women who played Dorothy. My frame of reference to the character, sits with Judy. Like that's, the love that I have and that I had as a child was for Judy. And so I was very curious about like how stepping into, this iconic role, done by Judy Garland, what that was like, the pressures that sit with it. And what I kind of came to discover is, Judy didn't really come up a lot in a lot of the women who played Dorothy. They were kind of focused on their own thing, their own bringing themselves to the character. So that the surprise was, you know, that we all see ourselves in this character in different ways, and it's not just Judy. Many people first saw The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, an adaptation through The Wiz, and Diana Ross was their Dorothy, and Ashanti for The Muppets has like a very large cult following of its own, which I was surprised to discover as well. So the fact that we got to talk to Ashanti and hear about her experiences playing multiple versions of Dorothy was exciting. The fact that I got to talk to Firuza Balk was incredible. I was surprised to hear that when the film first came out, the response that the film received was very negative because most critics and most audiences, a lot of that has to do with the marketing of the film, but they expected, the MGM film looms large. So they were expecting a follow-up to that, a musical, very bright, very colorful, and that's not what Return to Oz was. So she knew that it wasn't received well, even as a 9-year-old girl, and kind of assumed that nobody saw it, And
Hmm.
so she talks about years later, at fan conventions or whatever, running up to people who, expressed their love for the film, and she was kind of surprised. And so that was a surprise to hear as well. So I'm just very honored that I got to speak to so many incredible women.
Was Miss Piggy not available?
Oh, Miss Piggy was not available.
She's so hard to
Uh,
pin down.
I know. There was still some beef, with her and Ashanti on
Fair.
set, so I wanted to be sensitive.
I mean,
Never.
that footage is some of my favorite in the whole thing. Just, it's such a, there's so much, there's a lot of heart and soul and everything in there. And all the stories, as you said, everybody does see themselves in Dorothy, but it is, I was really curious, which you totally addressed right away, that was that, did they also see Judy all the time? Because I would see Judy. I'd have to like hide Judy like from all to be able to even pretend to be Dorothy. So it was fascinating. But those Miss Piggy scenes with Ashanti are just unreal. And it doesn't break you out of the mode of it, but just it makes it so much light and fun and powerful women in a different way.
Yeah, that was a fun that was fun to explore. So I also edited the film too. So, Muppets was a fun challenge because I didn't grow up with it, but and also Ashanti had also played the Dorothy and the Wiz on a Lincoln Center encore production, so
Yeah,
she has multiple versions of Dorothy, but I knew that the Muppets would be the one that, audiences would want to hear her talk about the most. And so kind of looking through, I always like to start with the press, to see the
right.
way that the actors talked, and about the film at the time, and just to see, kind of like what I attached to. And like as things go with Miss Piggy, that her thing is, kind of, she has these rivalries with her female
Right.
co-stars, and so those are always kind of fun to see. But I do think, so I had a little fun with that moment, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. But I think it just speaks to, it connects with something that Ashanti said in her interview. Is, she was constantly getting criticized throughout her career and second guessed, and not thinking she was serious, and didn't think she had the vocal skills, and didn't think she had the writing skills, and kind of dismissing her artistry. And you have to put all that aside. And so what better way to kind of, highlight that when you're, dealing with a sassy puppet who is,
Right.
you
Totally.
know,
And taking on this iconic character that was played by two of the greatest female icons,
hmm
So yeah, she's like, it's, I don't know, it's like mad respect to her for taking on all
yeah,
three of them.
it's incredible.
One of the things, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things I loved about your first film is that you do not see any of the interviewees. It's all just their voice. And it really puts you into the world of Showgirls. And if anyone hasn't seen it,
You
both
have,
Heidi and I have highly recommended it to
yeah.
people. It's great. But if I'm not mistaken, here you do that for everybody but the Dorothys. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So was that? I mean, obviously, it's kind of one of your signatures of filmmaking. Was that something you knew from the beginning? Like, I don't want to see Gregory McGuire. No offense, but
Yes, it wasn't that I didn't want to see them. It was just that I wanted to see the Dorothys. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to see the way that their eyes lit up when they talked about the time in their life. And I mean, one of my favorite moments in the film is the first, right after our kind of opening montage, musical montage, and we have Shanice Shante, and she's just like looking up to the light and to the skies, and she pauses for a minute, and she says, you know, have you ever felt like you were searching for something, and she asks the audience. And so what better way to lead into, a conversation about Dorothy Gale? And if, we were just hearing her audio, we wouldn't be able to see that light and that spark in her eyes. And I'm so happy that we did that. So that was very intentional from the beginning, that I wanted to reserve my production funds and budget to our on cameras for Dorothy's, and everything else would be audio. And I was very comfortable with just doing audio, as I did with You Don't Know Me, but I wanted this to take, a step up. And so when you decide to film, your interviews on camera, which is the way most documentaries are done, you have to be very intentional about like the space that they're in. And so the question, we had a lot of conversations about what's the look, what's the environment that these women are sitting in. And I didn't want like a kind of abstract like office or hotel space. I didn't want I played around with kind of like the behind the scenes, kind of sets, lights kind of vibe, but that, didn't feel right either. I also wanted something that I knew that I could replicate and that I could also potentially travel with too, because
Hmm.
I didn't know where we would be filming. So I wanted to start these and make it kind of adaptable. And so the inspiration for it was, there's a shot in MGM during Judy's Over the Rainbow, where she looks up to the heavens and it's only cut away, and you can see the clouds are breaking in the distance, and can see the sun kind of shining through. And it's one of my favorite shots of the film. And so I thought, well, what if it's like the sky? What if sky and the clouds and the heavens is the only thing that is consistent and that exists in our world and in Oz too? So I thought, the symbolism would be nice. And then it was like finding so they were painted canvas backdrops that we hung behind them. And so I knew that I wanted each of them to have their own look and feel and personality. And so I paired them accordingly, and I just love them.
You also, and it's something a lot of filmmakers try, and it's really hard to pull off. And I feel like you do it so incredibly well here, it should be intimidating for anybody else. The way you incorporate footage from Judy Garland films into the story, and that it is commenting on things, it is almost a representation of certain scenes. How long did it take you to find all that footage?
A long time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it was the Judy inventory was kind of going on behind the scenes during the development and production. And so, I didn't know how how I was going to use them in the beginning. I mean, with my first film, You Don't Know Me, I dip into Paul Verhoeven's other films, and so I use those as the visual commentary to support the interviewees' experiences and the responses to the film. And so that was, kind of like the top layer of what was going on in You Don't Know Me. And so with It's Dorothy, I knew I would be dipping into Judy's filmography, but I wasn't sure how much of it we would see, if Judy would have a section, or her stuff would be in the first act, or it would be kind of chronological. And so when I first started editing, I just very much, I called them little bricks. I was just kind of building this brick by brick, and the interesting themes that revealed themselves along the way in the interviews. And so I thought it would be a very, if I was treating this like a biography, I was going to kind of start from birth to death. And so uh I thought it would be 1900 book, movie, whiz, Return to Oz, contemporary. But I knew that the majority of my interviews were contemporary reflections. And so, you'd have everybody kind of like condensed and consolidated at the end. And I knew that it needed to have a different life to it. So when it was actually in Nichelle Lewis's interview. She was on Broadway at the time, playing Dorothy in the Wiz in the revival, and she shared, an incredibly powerful story about just her father passing away when she was 9 years old, and her world being torn apart, and the way that she coped and struggled and dealt and grieved with that. And so that was kind of like a moment that clicked of like, this is her cyclone. This is exactly what happened to Dorothy when she was swept up and taken to Oz. And so I thought, well, why don't we, kind of assign and connect the emotional experience of what Dorothy was experiencing in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and use that as the narrative skeleton that the stories would attach themselves to. And so I had that kind of like at the base layer, and then above that, we have our Wizard of Oz kind of adaptation material that, I can kind of point to and reference. But I knew that Judy would have to exist somewhere. And in that first version of the edit, she Stonewall and her passing happened kind of at the end of the first act, and I knew that just didn't feel right. I wanted to keep her alive throughout the film, and so what better way to keep her alive than use her as in her work and her art as the visual touch points to connect to the character as it continues to grow and evolve and learn, and connect that to the experiences of the women who played Dorothy. And so it was just so much fun. I watched films and I would put little markers and um, you know, keyframes. I would put build sequences of responses and shots that I liked, and I knew that there would be a place for them somewhere. So it was, just a lot of fun. I highly recommend people jumping back into Judy's films if you want to be cheered up.
Well, in addition to the character herself and the people who played her, obviously the song of all the songs that is so iconic, and you did an amazing job of trying of incorporating that without derailing that we're focused on Dorothy, not on the saddest song ever written, but or in my opinion. But
Mhm.
the how did you figure out that way to chunk that in there that way? Because it moved really smoothly without losing momentum.
Thank you. Yeah, the Over the Rainbow, obviously, one of the greatest songs of all time. The beautiful thing about Over the Rainbow I think, everyone has their favorite version. But it's a song that has been adapted itself. Like the story, The Wizard of Oz has been adapted many times. Over the Rainbow has many adaptations and many different arrangements and versions. And so it was fun to take the song, kind of break it apart, find the many different versions. We start with Sarah Vaughan, Eva Cassidy, Celine Dion, Barbara Streisand, ending with, the incredible Patti LaBelle. Um, and so just using the song and guiding through it at the point in which we hear the song in the movie. I knew we would need to hear it early on, and acknowledge it early on, and it also finds its way, back into the film later. But yeah, and I didn't think that we needed to get into a lot of the history about it. We didn't need to learn about the writing. I mean, all that's been done. All that has been covered in other films and other projects. And I encourage people to, if they're interested in, uh, Harold Arlen, they can, and Yip Harburg, they can, find a wealth of information on YouTube. But I just wanted to live with it and sit with it, and also, Rufus Wainwright, who I interviewed, had many, many stories about Over the Rainbow. So I knew, I wanted to connect his experience to that, and him learning the song at a young age from his mother, Kate McGarrigle, who's a famous folk singer, was a beautiful way to connect it to him and his story.
Yeah, his story's great. It's beautiful.
One of the things that, and I think you mentioned it too, the one actress talking about when her father passed away and how she connected with the film. And there's a
Mhm.
great moment at the end of the film that I don't want to ruin, about one of the other actresses sort of explaining what happened to her after playing the part in a way that is not what you would think would happen. And you're kind of constantly telling these personal stories. I'm assuming screening this film has just been a glut of people coming up to you afterwards with their personal stories of what this movie meant to them, what this character means to them. And you have probably met every single person who's played Dorothy in a elementary to high school version of the show. Am I correct?
Mhm. Correct. I,
Yeah.
I even got in. I just screened at Hot Docs in Toronto, and we had a screening at the for the what one of the screening series that they have every year is a Docs for Schools program, and so they had like 400 high school students that were bussed in on Friday to screen the film, and afterwards. One of the students during the Q&A said like, "Hi, I'm actually playing Dorothy in our high school production. We'd like to invite you to the performance next month. Unfortunately, I'm out of the country and out of the state, so I had to sadly decline. But that was my first invite.
Something.
Yeah.
Shanti,
Great.
your move.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's the beautiful thing about this character is that you don't have to have played her in on Broadway or in a big film. You know, we all, many people have performed this role when they were children, and even if it wasn't on their, the stages of their elementary school, it was on their fireplaces or their kitchens or their living rooms, and so we tap. I It was really fun to tap into that, that childlike innocence, and remind yourself that imagination and creativity are still important even as adults.
And,
So it's been very incredible experiencing this film with audiences.
and not to go down the dark and cynical path, but
Mhm.
when you say the words, I'm making a movie about a character from The Wizard of Oz, it
Mhm.
just feels like that sentence is rife with dollar signs of people who own things saying, are you though?
Mhm.
How much of that were you getting pushback early on when you're like, I'm making this movie? Or did you fair use it all? How did you get all this stuff? Because you have so many representations of Dorothy throughout the film.
Mhm. So yeah, like my last film, You Don't Know Me, we looked at Showgirls through the lens of Paul Verhoeven's other films. And we worked very closely with a very talented team of clearance attorneys. And so they help guide and provide notes and context and feedback. So we're constantly shaping the edit based on, what we can say and what's deemed too much. I mean, we had a very early phone call with them in the beginning of the process just to get an idea of, like, is there anything we should be aware of, before we start this? And the interesting thing is, this isn't a documentary about a film. This is a documentary about a character, and that character first appeared in L. Frank Baum's book in 1900, and that book is in public domain. So every single adaptation of this character through film, through stage, through TV is a representation of that book, that original story. So I knew I wanted to keep the book text very close, and we reference it throughout with text that helps guide us and remind us where we are on Dorothy's journey. Um, and by the end of the edit, we had a spreadsheet, like all documentaries have at the end, a spreadsheet, but ours was, I feel like, You Don't Know Me had 800 shots that we had to kind of send back and clear, and Dorothy had 1,300. And time code in, time code out, duration, a description of the shot. And it was just a back and forth of, what's clear, what's not. And you know, I'm used to doing that. I'm used to that process. So it was something I wasn't afraid to enter into.
The other great thing is, I think it's the last quote in the film, um, is from Baum's, is it great granddaughter?
Yes.
What has the family and the estate made of it?
I haven't had much contact with the rest of Baum's estate. My only contact is Gita, his great granddaughter. Her mother, whose name was Ozma, her birth given name was Dorothy when she was born. Very much has kind of carried the mantle, doing a lot of the engaging herself in the conventions and the community, and so that's how I got connected with her. It was out here in Los Angeles at a convention called OzCon. So we exchanged info, and she happened to live in Santa Monica, so we were in the same city. So we got to meet in person for our interview, which was such a pleasure and a joy. And she has just been, one of my biggest supporters along the way. She was just excited that this story was being told in this way. And also, one of the reasons why I wanted to speak with her was she was one of two family members that went to South Dakota in the mid 2000s, after it was revealed that L. Frank Baum had written some incredibly harmful and painful racist material in a newspaper that he owned at the time. And those editorials had been public knowledge within the Oz community, but before starting this project, I was not aware of them. And so to know that it was her who wanted to try to make things right and formally apologize to the indigenous members of the community that were impacted by those words.
As we wrap up, your title card at the end of the film was just a great little, like, I couldn't help but smile as I see it. When in the process did you know you wanted that credit?
The you mean like the
It's
written?
it's Jeffrey
Oh, it's
McHale.
so. Oh yeah, it's Jeffrey at the end. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's a Jeffrey McHale film. Yeah.
yeah.
That was at the very end. It was kind of like, should we do them all like that? Like it's uh producers direct, but yeah, it was just it just seemed like a natural fit
Mhm.
after It's Dorothy, and that was, you know, kind of one of the questions throughout the process of like what the title is. And we had a couple working titles that we had thrown around, and I'd actually made a little survey with 10 different titles of the film that sent out to people that I knew and trusted, and got the survey results back. And there wasn't anything like conclusive from them, but there was actually, I was watching Return to Oz with my son at our kitchen table, and before we locked the edit, and I had it on in the background, and at the very end of the film, Uncle Henry picks up Firuza Balk and carries her off, safely, after the storm, after they find her, and he says, "It's Dorothy," and my ears like shot up, and that was already one of them, that I was considering, but I was like, well, okay, now here it is, and then there was another moment in which Shanice Shantae had said it in her production as well, so I'm like, "It's Dorothy" is just kind of the perfect way
Yeah.
to wrap it up.
It's Dorothy, the new documentary by Jeffrey McHale, is available to stream right now on Peacock, and it will be streaming. And a little bit later this month or early next, it will be available to stream elsewhere online. For more information, check them out on Instagram, where they're at It's Dorothy Film.
Nigel, is that you? Are you here, Nigel?